Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our participants, dignitaries, and our highly esteemed guest speaker, Honorable Shri Aaditya Thackeray, Cabinet Minister of Tourism, Environment and Protocol, Government of Maharashtra, to energizing the startup ecosystem in Maharashtra, a conversation with Aaditya Thackeray, organized by the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. All participants will be muted to avoid any disturbances during the course of the session. To consume less bandwidth and have clarity, you may like to stop the video streaming at your end. Kindly post all your relevant queries in the chat section so that time permits, we'll be able to address the Q&A. So as we begin this session, may I request Mr. Rajiv Poddar, President, IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to present the welcome address. Over to you, Mr. Poddar.
Thanks, Selby. Honorable Shri Aaditya Thackeray ji, Minister for Tourism, Environment and Protocol, Government of Maharashtra, Ms. Paula Mariwala, Chairman, Startup and Innovation Committee, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I extend a warm and hearty welcome to all of you to the webinar on energizing the startup ecosystem in Maharashtra. I am grateful to our young and dynamic Minister, Shri Aaditya Bhai, for sparing his valuable time and honoring us by joining us today. In the history of the Indian startup ecosystem, the period between 2010 and 2020 will be remembered as a decade of democratization. As never before, startups are synonymous with innovation, creativity, and mass problem-solving capacities. They are seen as gateway to India's dream of becoming a $5 trillion economy. In the past 10 years, this ecosystem ventured into uncharted territory and achieved several milestones, from boosting more than 50,000 tech startups and raising $1 billion fund deals to India becoming the third largest startup ecosystem. The ecosystem has become the most sought of opportunity. India saw 11 startups joining the Unicorn Club in 2020, with fintech company PhonePe raising its valuation to 5.5 billion while spinning off to an independent entity from Flipkart. To boost the startup system in Maharashtra, Honorable Chief Minister Shri Uddhav Thackeray ji has recently launched a scheme aimed at providing financial assistance to innovative startups to file for IT patents. Maharashtra was ranked second in India on Innovation Index 2020 released by the Niti Aayog. Our goal should be to make Maharashtra number one in fintech, startups, skill development, and in surging new innovations. Aditya Bhai, I am pleased to inform you that we at IMC have embarked on a mission Engage Maharashtra. In December, the same was launched by Honorable Chief Minister Shri Uddhav ji in the presence of Honorable Shri Subhash Desai ji. The mission entails our chamber and its expert committees working closely with the government of Maharashtra to reboot, reform, and research the economy of our state. IMC has been quintessentially rooted in Maharashtra, having its headquarters in Mumbai, and is committed to play its part to help the government build capacity and resilience for future shocks. As part of the mission, our Travel, Tourism and Hospitality Committee, along with India Rating, is working on a white paper on spiritual tourism to boost tourism in the state. The white paper will be completed in a fortnight, and we hope you will honor us by releasing the same. We will approach you for a suitable time. Once again, a warm welcome to everybody for today's webinar. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Poddar. May I now request Ms. Pearl Shah, member, IMC Startups and Innovations Committee, to present the introductory address. Over to you, Ms. Shah.
Thanks, LB. Good morning, everyone. I am Pearl Shah, member of the IMC Startups and Innovation Committee. On behalf of the committee, a very warm welcome to all who have joined us today on this lovely Saturday morning. Now, for the reason we are all here, I am thrilled to introduce our guest for today's discussion and a dear friend, Aditya Thackeray, Cabinet Minister for Environment, Tourism and Protocol in the government of Maharashtra. One of the youngest Indian political leaders, he represents the Worli constituency in the Maharashtra Legislative Assembly. He is the leader of the Shiv Sena and president of the Yuva Sena, youth wing of Shiv Sena. A football enthusiast, he serves as the vice president of the Western India Football Association and as the president of the Mumbai District Football Association. An avid environmentalist, he has been instrumental in bringing prominent environment issues to the forefront and also spearheading changes across Maharashtra's tourism policy. We are extremely delighted to have you here with us today, Aditya. Thank you for taking out the time to join us.
Thank you.
Moderating the discussion, we have with us Ms. Paula Mariwala, founding chair of the IMC Startups and Innovation Committee. An alumnus of Stanford University, Paula is founding managing director of Seed Fund Advisors, an early stage VC firm, co-founder and president of Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs India, and promoter director of Hinditron Group of Companies, one of India's oldest technology companies. She is managing partner in Aureolis Ventures, her family office, where she invests in innovative companies focused on social impact. Deeply engaged with the entrepreneurial ecosystem in India, Paula is on the advisory board of several incubators and funds and has been instrumental in shaping the startup ecosystem in India since the last 15 years. Thank you for joining us today, Paula. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into today's discussion. Over to you, Paula.
Thank you, Pearl. Thank you, President. And thank you to IMC for really giving us this platform to have a discussion. A warm welcome, Aditya ji. Thank you for accepting this kind invitation, and thanks, Pearl, for organizing this. As it was said, the IMC Startup Committee is the youngest committee of IMC. So we are thrilled that we have a very young member of our political party, of our government, to chat with us today. And we really want this to be a free-flowing discussion in the spirit of youth and innovation. Rajiv ji very nicely has prefaced, the context of why this committee came into being. IMC, as you know, has interacted very closely with the government on various industries. And considering the role the startup ecosystem has been playing in the past few years, the management thought it has to include this sector as a prominent committee, and that's how we all came together. So considering, that IMC represents all the different industries of India, uh, Mumbai is the commercial capital where we are rooted. Um, However, where the startup scene is concerned in the last 10 to 15 years, Bombay or Mumbai has not been at the center, at the epicenter of driving the startup innovation in our country. That distinction has gone to some other regions in the country, um, primarily because it has been technology that has led the change that has occurred due to startup, the innovation that has come out of the startup ecosystem. So my question to you to kick off this discussion, Aditya ji, is how do you see this changing? Mumbai and Maharashtra playing a more pivotal role in participating in this whole startup innovation that is really driving the progress of our country and indeed at the world at large. Are there specific incentives, some of them Rajiv ji did mention, that your government is looking at, specific sectors that you particularly are keen on bringing, considering the background we have in Maharashtra and in Mumbai, and how do we bring this at the forefront of leading Maharashtra's growth over the next few years under your government? And what is the more role people like, organizations like IMC and people like us who are involved in the startup ecosystem, how can we work together to take this forward?
Thank you, Paulaji, for that question. And thank you to start off with. Thank you, Paul, for that very kind introduction. I'm sure that wouldn't have come back in school, but it's very kind now. And thank you, Rajiv ji, for having me over. It's a pleasure to be joining everyone today for this interaction. And when first spoke to me about, starting off with this whole topic of startups, I was just thinking over what do we classify really as startups? Because honestly, startups can be entrepreneurship, startups could be newer ventures, startup could be innovation, startup could be just disruptions, or startup could be regular, people who are starting off with something. And then we finally realize at some point of life, we're all startups. For example, we are a startup in government sector today, taking over only last year and just learning, the ropes of the government. But I think what is very crucial is how do we bring more startups to Maharashtra? Or how we, like you rightfully mentioned, how do we not miss the bus of startups like we missed the bus of the digital revolution and the third industrial revolution. Now, the whole idea behind what a government really can do and not do is totally dependent on what do we intend to achieve. I think if we have to bring more startups here, more innovations here, more entrepreneurships out here, the government really can support through various ways. And that is what we're exactly focusing on. If you've noticed throughout the lockdown as well, we've done a couple of things that probably might help bring us more business, more industries, more startup to Maharashtra. And in terms of the FDI, we have been able to get the maximum FDI in the last year across the country. If you've noticed, Maharashtra pulled in almost 1,13,000 crores of MOUs, and we've allotted land to more than 85% of these industries already by the end of the year. So I think that is very crucial. But in terms of infrastructure, I was just going through a couple of things that that the government has done when we speak of startups. We've signed up with NASCOM. I think that is a major move. And Rajiv ji was saying that we've started off on a mission to pull more and more startups, more and more industries, starting off here in Maharashtra. In terms of innovation, we're reforming our education sector. We're trying to get more and more questions asked, more innovation, more research, more development happening in Maharashtra. But essentially, I strongly believe and firmly believe that there are two sectors where Maharashtra as a government and administration can help startups and regular industries. One is providing connectivity and infrastructure, which most of the roads, something like the Mumbai-Nagpur highway, the MTHL, coastal road, the new airport around Pune, around Navi Mumbai, all of these things are doing. But the other thing really is twofold, and that is what personally I've been looking into more than anything else. One is ease of doing business. Now, when we speak of ease of doing business, of course, we think of a single window clearance. Now, very practically speaking, a single window clearance, even if we say single window, there are multiple more windows or doors behind that single window that the government has to really coordinate with. Even if you give the application form into one window, there are 15 other windows that have to coordinate, that the government has to really work around with, because you've got safety, you've got licenses, you've got compliances, all of that before you start off. So we're trying to reduce that, make it more time bound and easier. And from my department as environment, what I'm looking at is not to be a hurdle in setting up more industries, be more proactive in getting industries to reduce the carbon footprint, and three, not be a speed breaker in the speed of Maharashtra's progress. Now, these are some of the things that we're really focusing on. And of course, when I say not be a hurdle or a speed breaker, I'm not saying compromise on the environmental aspect. We're trying to bring more and more industries to be compliant, more and more corporates to reduce the carbon footprint, whereas we're also focusing on ourselves as the government to reduce our carbon footprint as well. But once you've set up the industry, ease of doing business in our country largely focuses on the licenses bit. For example, if you've got to set up a license somewhere, an industry somewhere, you've got to get the environmental clearance, the fire clearance, the safety norms, all of that put together. What we hardly focus on is after you've reduced the license, after you've set up the industry, after you've started running the industry, what about the compliances that we have to do each year, month after month, with different offices, with different officers, with different departments? We're setting up a commission very soon to reduce the compliances and probably move to self-certifications after you've set up the industry. I think that would be a huge, huge gain for not just startups, but bigger industries, MSMEs, because then we don't get entangled in the multiple compliances that we keep going around for all year through. So I think these are a couple of things that we can really focus on when we speak about startups and industry at large, because Maharashtra is one state which has got a legacy of being captain and pioneer in industries, in innovation, in terms of even digitization. Now, to focus on, we can't really micro focus only on one sector of the industry. We also have to focus on the big sector that already exists, the MSMEs and the startups. I think we're focusing on all of that.
Thanks, Aditya. That's a really comprehensive answer and gives us an insight into how the government is thinking about it. I want to pick up on one or two things that you mentioned. One is on environment, and I know that that's a cause very close to your heart, and you're also the minister in charge. There is often this debate about environment, sustainability versus progress and development. Uh, and there are often two extremes, and sometimes they don't meet. We have projects like Coastal Road, which has had several views on whether that's good for the environment, good for progress, etc. The metro is also there. Considering the complexity of doing things sustainably, and keeping environment in mind, how do you think the government can take a balanced view, on educating not only the people who are implementing these ideas and projects, but also the people who are affected by it, and B, on a broader scale, do you see opportunities for innovation to bridge this gap of development at the cost of environment and vice versa? Are there any specific examples, for example, that you may have studied in other cities or other economies where this has really worked well and that you could adopt? And again, where innovation by startups or by business communities can come in to do this, to implement the whole sustainable part of development?
I think what we've been able to prove in the last 1 year as an administration is exactly this, that we can coexist with environment, and we are made to coexist with environment naturally. If you look at the story of Maharashtra from December or November end 2019 to about right now, it's been of coexistence and sustainability. There's a prefix to development which is called sustainable development. And if you look at last year's story, really, everyone's been battling with COVID. We've all stayed indoors. We've got a mask on our faces, except when we're in Zoom conferences. But going beyond that, I think there are three sectors which prove what I'm saying. One is in terms of industry. We started off with the first tranche of Magnetic Maharashtra in June 2020. And from June to now, we've signed up about 1,13,000 crores of MOUs. Like I said, more than 80 to 85% of those industries or MOUs have been executed, land allotted, work is started. And I don't think it's been faster than this ever before, where all the clearances, permits, permissions, licenses have been given and the work has started on ground. So I think that is one of the most important things that we've been able to achieve in terms of creating growth and jobs. Along with that, we've not stopped on the infrastructure. Even in the lockdown, wherever there was workforce available, we've gone ahead with work. So there was Coastal Road happening, the MTHL Coastal Road northbound, GMLR work will start very soon. The Worli-Shivdi connector, Mumbai-Nagpur, then Mumbai-Pune bypass. You have a lot of these roads, railway works, highways, bridges, all of these things happening, dams happening all throughout Maharashtra, and we've not stopped on that. But what is most important is while we focus on these two sectors, which is industry and infrastructure, we've also focused on environment. In last year itself, around September, we declared RA, and everyone out here knows the importance of RA to Mumbai, 808 acres in a city like Mumbai as a reserve forest. I don't think any other government around the world has been able to do it. Any other city around the world has been able to do it. And the reason why we declared RA as a forest really is not just because it has trees. I mean, we'll have trees in our garden as well. RA goes beyond just having a thick density of trees. You have got larger and lesser fauna and flora and fauna. You've got the leopards, you've got the rusty spotted cats, you've got spiders endemic to RA, you've got plant species endemic to RA. So essentially you have a whole ecosystem thriving in RA, and we had to declare it as a forest. But going beyond that, we declared almost 10 conservation reserves across the Sahyadris. Never before in one stroke has a declaration of 10 conservation reserves taken place. Kanargaon, which is a fifth sanctuary, wildlife sanctuary, Tillari Conservation Reserve, which is almost 29.32 square kilometers, where by June this year, we'd have got 10,000 hectares of mangroves into the Indian Forest Act officially and protected as mangroves. So we can coexist. Now, when we speak of coexistence, again, where I speak of the three sectors, it may have seemed that the three sectors and three different silos. But looking at what we have been able to achieve now in terms of coexistence, is, for example, the Mumbai-Nagpur highway. Yes, it will be great connectivity for all of us. It will take us to Nagpur in about 8 or 9 hours. By May 1st, almost 50% of the road would have been complete. Now, when the new government took over, we went beyond the road. We said, let's have 24 greenfield nodes or cities around the Mumbai-Nagpur highway. So we'll have an educational city. We've already got foreign universities speaking to us. We're looking at putting up a health city, not just from curative health, but to preventive healthcare, all of that, recuperative healthcare. So these are some of the things coming up. But along with growing the human footprint, the Mumbai-Nagpur highway, for which I've been pushing for almost 2-3 years to solarize it, we'll be solarizing a Mumbai-Nagpur highway and generating almost 230 megawatts of solar energy from the Mumbai-Nagpur highway. Likewise, we're doing for the Mumbai-Pune highway. We're looking also at rainwater harvesting alongside Mumbai-Pune highway, which runs through our catchment areas of the Western Ghats. In a week or two, we'll be ready to inaugurate, do the Bhumi Pujan of a hydel energy plant at the Babasaheb Thackeray Middle Vaitana Dam. That is 40 megawatts, but going beyond that, renewable energy, solar energy, we've got 80 megawatts of floating solar on that very dam. And if that is successful, we'll be going for all our dams like that. So I think these are some of the things that we can really look at. And when we speak of coexistence, again, largely when we speak of the environment, we look at the rural areas, we look at the far-flung areas where we have no human settlement. But what I've come to believe is if we have to work towards fighting for climate change action and mitigation plans, we've also got to look at urban areas where most of our human carbon footprint exists. And in a city like Mumbai, we've been actively pushing for urban forests. We had set a target of almost 300,000 trees by mid 2021, but we might just cross that very soon. So I think that is some of the places that we're really focusing on and talking of coexistence.
That's fantastic to know, Aditya. I can just sense so many opportunities for innovations and for entrepreneurs to jump in, whether it's a renewables, whether even it is carbon sequestration through forestation, etc. Vertical gardens and so many other things that entrepreneurs can think of. On that note, are you specifically giving incentives for green industries, for innovations around this? And again, there are two views around this, right? That the government should incentivize and encourage these kind of industries, or the other is government should stay out of it, like maybe they did in software, and let entrepreneurs just figure it out and let consumers adopt as naturally the economics would permit. What is your view on that? Because this is a bit controversial always when it's when one is trying to promote sustainability. Sorry?
I'd like to hear from you. What is better, government getting into it or staying out of it?
You put me in the spot. That's a good one. I think the government should enable, but then largely stay out of it.
Exactly.
Incentives where needed, maybe in sectors like energy, because if the economics is not working out in the beginning, I think that could be, but it should be measured involvement. As an entrepreneur, I'm always scared to deal with the government, but enabling environment and promoting consumption of green things or the right things. For example, if there is a way to promote use of EVs, for example, right, that incentivizes people to use EVs more, that will help entrepreneur, industry, and the environment, right? So I think creating an ecosystem is where the government, but not in terms of too much regulation.
Exactly. I mean, even at, in my Department of Tourism and where I have MTDC, I've come to believe strongly that as governments and again, governments are transient, but in terms of policies, we've got to be enablers rather than get into the micromanagement of any sector or industry. Only when there's a market failure, maybe we need to intervene. But otherwise, we can enable them with good policies that are, again, coming from that sector itself. Now, if we make a policy in isolation and then try to impose it on that sector, it's not going to work. So in fact, like when you ask me about getting more and more entrepreneurs into green sector or, the renewables, I think the next big thing probably for India and a country as vast and populated as India would be energy transition. I think that is something we ought to focus on because energy transition is the requirement for us today. We have to move from thermal energy to green energy. Now, in terms of green energy, what is really useful? Do we have enough offshore wind? Can we use that? Is nuclear energy clean enough? Solar energy, can we really have better storage capacity? Can we have more efficiency in that? I think these are some of the things that we need to really work on. And that is where innovations, that is where startups, that is where micro startups could really come up, because I think we have the power to reach out where we haven't reached out even as of today after independence, in terms of the smaller villages, the far-flung areas, and the big cities then, with such technology and solutions. I think that is where really, the soul of this startup could, start growing from.
Absolutely.
But again, in terms of EVs, in terms of the shift and the whole debate about incentives, there are 2, 3 things I have personally as an opinion for this. And, one of the things I'd like to draw from what Chief Minister Mr. Aaditya Thackeray mentioned at the conference with the Prime Minister for the Niti Aayog is, when we are now trying to invite industries, when we are trying to set up a more hospitable environment for industries or growth, I think what really happens is there's a tough competition between different states, between different cities, and the competition gets so cutthroat between the states that sometimes the states tend to lose. Yeah. So the states try to basically tend to lose out on the competition, and in terms of the finances that they can put to better use when you've given more incentives or policy relaxations than the other state. And where does it really end? So I think we need to have a bottom line and a top line between where the 2 states can really compete for anything to be set up in a particular state. But going beyond that, we've been working on a policy for EVs, and that'll be out very soon. We've set up a small working group, a high-level committee for that. There's the Transport Department, UD Department, Industry Department, Energy Department working together. I'm sort of heading that committee. But again, in that, we're looking at large-scale incentives to not just for EVs really, but for the entire ecosystem of electric mobility. Because when we speak of electric mobility, it just can't be electric cars supported by conventional sources of energy or burning coal somewhere. We've got to create an ecosystem where we have electric cars or electric tempos, electric trucks, electric cycles, electric bicycles, scooters, supported by clean energy, renewable energy, which is a part of energy transition. I think that is something like maybe hydrogen fuel, maybe electric, maybe solar panels. I think these are some of the things that we really need to work on. Again, going beyond that, when I speak of ecosystem, it's not just renewable energy or electric mobility in the city, but then how do we have more and more industries that are setting up the cars, the batteries, the other components in our own state? I think that is also something we're really focusing on. And then, of course, the ancillaries and the supply system. So we need to create an ecosystem for the next 50 years, 100 years, which will start off from today. And again, do we need incentives to survive? I think that is where we really come to, because be it climate change technologies, be it environment-based technologies, be it sustainability, be it the future, I don't think we were ever incentivized to use the cars or vehicles that we're using today. We were never incentivized to, set up or use the conventional things that we're using today. And going in the future, when it's a thing about survival, like when COVID happened, we were never incentivized to wear the masks, even though today many people still don't wear the mask or on the nose itself. But incentives, yes, to a certain point, policy benefits, yes, to a certain point. But I think now it's a matter of survival, and we need to look at it through that lens today.
No, that's very well said, Aditya, and it's music to our ears, because we see so many young entrepreneurs wanting to do innovation in the field of EV, particularly in storage batteries, in also setting up infrastructure, in making sure that the transportation is very eco-friendly, and that's something that's resonating with consumers, and that is enabling many more startups in this space. And considering that Maharashtra has always taken the lead in automobile manufacturing, the whole industry of auto ancillaries in the whole Pune belt, etc. Do you see Maharashtra really taking the lead in the country in getting EVs, the whole ecosystem of EVs, manufacturing, research, etc., coming to Maharashtra? And also, for example, we have one of the best transportation systems in the country in terms of our BST buses, etc. Is there any plan to make these electric? Public transport becoming electric would really also fuel the whole transition that you're talking about. So just some thoughts on that.
Personally, I'm very, very keen to make Maharashtra the hub of electric mobility, and maybe hydrogen fuel cell if it's workable in the current scheme of things. So these are two things that we're really focusing on, because again, like I said, I'm a big believer in energy transition, and not just because it will bring business or investment into Maharashtra, but I genuinely believe that it is the requirement of today. And if nobody else, I think we should take the lead and start moving further in terms of alternate fuel. I think that is one of the most important things. In terms of our buses being, electrified, or basically getting an electric fleet into our BST bus system. The story of this started really around 2012, 2013, when I was traveling around somewhere in another country, and I saw electric buses there. And I said, look, if we have electric buses in this country, we surely can have it in our own city. So in 2013, 2014, we put out a tender for the first electric buses. We got them in 2015, 6 of them still running in the Fort Ferry and the Fort area. And you'll see them with the green number plate and the electricity, the symbol of that, electric cars. So basically, those are still running. They're doing well. But back then, when we got them, the technology was such that 8 hours of charging and about 120 kilometers of run for 8 hours of charging. The next batch was about FAME 1 and FAME 2, because after that first batch of electric buses that came to Mumbai, when we started off with electric mobility as a discussion in the country, the government in the center changed, and then there was this whole policy of FAME 1 and FAME 2. So in 2015, we applied for FAME 1. We got another 40 buses which are running on our streets. Again, the charge was around 6 hours charging and about 130 to 150 kilometers. 2016, those buses came in. 2018, 2019, we applied for FAME 2. And now we have another 40 buses already running and 300 buses yet to come. And now we're looking for at least 25% of our fleet to be electric in the next 3 years. So positively moving on that, because these buses are actually wonderful. In 3 hours, you have almost 160 kilometers of running in terms of the latest technology. The other day, we were approached by a few companies that are claiming 1 hour's charge and about 200 kilometers of running. So technology is rapidly evolving in terms of electric mobility and hopefully hydrogen fuel technology. The thing is, how fast can we run along with it? These are beautiful vehicles without emissions, without sound. You can literally stand where the typical exhaust of the bus was and breathe normally without having to breathe in the polluted air. And you can be in the bus and not realize it's switched on. So I think these are some of the wonderful things that technology is bringing to us now.
Again, this is, tons of opportunities for entrepreneurs. I know I just met a startup which is working with the bus systems, in various cities to completely digitize. So, there is no direct exchange. You can do it all through your app, and there is no leakage of any sort. And also figure out, how much charge do you have, and, how far it will go. I think one of the things that is lacking is the EV infrastructure. And if you can, if the government really, that's where it comes in to put in the EV infrastructure. There are so many companies who really want to take advantage of various business models which will come about using EVs.
So I have a little differing perspective on this when it comes with policymakers and largely, many thinkers in this field, and I may be wrong. But when we speak of EV infrastructure, we largely tend to focus only on chargers and not the entire ecosystem. So I think we should of course start off with renewable energy supporting EVs. But going further, what I'm looking at is, many companies tend to put EV charging, and even we do that because, it's become a natural thing around the world. EV charging spots in parking places, which are public parking places or bus depots or areas which are actually a little away from our homes. But putting the chargers first and then bringing in the vehicle or expecting a vehicle to come in is probably not what will help us, because it's almost like, getting an iPhone charger first or a Samsung charger first and then expecting us to buy a phone that is compatible to the charger. I think, we are not going to go, and as a society also, we don't believe in parking our cars or vehicles in a public parking lot somewhere, at least 2 blocks away from our homes. We'll prefer to park it, be it on the footpath or on the road, but right under our homes. So I think when we start getting more quality EVs, now if you see, it's only now with a couple of cars that have been launched in the last 10, probably are going to be launched very soon in the first quarter of the year, will we get quality EVs. Otherwise we didn't really have quality electric vehicles. We had buses which are electric, but if you ask me to change my vehicle to an electric mobility, it shouldn't be a downgrade. It should be an upgrade of safety features. It should be an upgrade of efficiency, of the mileage it gives, because we tend to think of mileage normally when we buy cars, and then safety, of course. So I think once we start buying more and more EVs, we would naturally have more and more chargers which are compatible with our vehicles in our own housing societies, in our compounds, in our buildings. I think that is really what is going to help, not putting the chargers first. And this is my personal opinion, not going by the policymakers' opinion, but I think that is how we should look at this whole.
Yeah, you're looking at a market pull model, which is which is
Because,
how it's a very entrepreneurial
till
thing.
we don't get the quality in EVs, we're not going to move. And now I see a lot of, if you just Google the upcoming EVs in the sector, I think a lot of us would probably change from our vehicles to EVs, looking at the quality that's coming in. So I think that is very crucial. And then of course the charging infrastructure comes in. Then you'll have a lot of other things. One is swappable batteries, which are replaceable.
Yes.
You might have the batteries being converted into utility, like you have the fuel today. You just go to the fuel station, you replace your battery, get another one, pay for it, and move ahead. So these are some of the things that can obviously develop. But personally, I don't think having charging stations first is the way ahead, because what if the whole socket changes? Then your infrastructure goes for a toss.
No, that's a very, like I said, very entrepreneurial thinking. And I can say that a lot of entrepreneurs are working on models based on, for example, swapping batteries and so on, and end-to-end solutions. So I think that's going to be a fantastic sector to watch out for venture capitalists like us, who are really meeting very exciting entrepreneurs with very innovative technologies. Moving a bit slightly away from the EVs, another thing which is your passion, which is tourism. And of course, 2020 has been, just a total washout where tourism is concerned, where hospitality is concerned. And I know that it is a focus of this government to bring it back. So would love to hear your thoughts for all the entrepreneurs out there who are in this sector. And do you see what kind of changes do you see, what kind of adoptions do you envisage happening, and how can this sector really respond to what is being called the new normal, in terms of tourism completely changing or evolving, and bringing in the sustainable aspect as well?
I think 2020 has been a mix year for tourism, because we've got mixed reports of two different extremities. The first 3 or 4 months of the lockdown, I think nobody was stepping down, and in a strict lockdown, of course, we expected nobody to step down without a mask, just go out for a limited time, come back, do whatever work is required, and then of course come back home and not travel anywhere. But what we started realizing is by around September, October, people started booking homestays, villas, agro farms, and they started spending 3 to 4 months wherever you had a good internet connection, good electricity. I think people were very, very comfortable spending the latter half of the monsoons and some of the winters at farm stays and outdoor villa stays. I think that has really picked up. So like I said, the first 6 months of the lockdown, from about March to about October, were complete zero on tourism, and we really were obviously facing a lot of trouble in terms of our restaurants picking up or deliveries or all of that. But suddenly after October, when Mission Begin Again phase 3 started, I think the good news is the restaurant home deliveries were more than 120% of the pre-COVID times. People wanted to step out, because staying home for a long, long time for a lot of workaholics like all of us can be a little disorienting. So they wanted to step out, they wanted to travel for 3-4 days, and the pattern really has continued. So even today, if you look at places like Mahabaleshwar, Mathiran, Alibag, Raigad, Ratnagiri, Sindhu, these areas really, and somewhere near Pune, largely the outdoors, you have all these villa stays, home stays, farm stays, all of them being booked for 3, 4, 5 months, and not, you don't get even a single day of booking even on the weekdays. So people are stepping out in that sense. So now we're moving from, anything else to be focused on domestic tourism. And even domestic tourism, probably just our intrastate tourism, because there's so many people who would want to step out for 3-4 days, just breathe fresh air and come back home and then get on to work. I think that is really crucial. So that is one. But what I can be really proud of, and our state can be proud of, is one news channel, India Today. They have these yearly rankings for big states and small states, and in terms of all the departments. And obviously, when we looked at the rankings last year, we were conveyed that we stood number 1, and we jumped from number 5 to number 1 in terms of tourism in the big states ranking. And we've put back all the other states and jumped that much. So when we were figuring out why that happened, we were like, is this a joke? Because obviously there is no tourism happening and no people coming in, no people going out, no people moving. They had largely focused on our policy shifts. And in the last year of 2020, we really focused our entire work from developing tourist spots, because of course that you need a lot of workforce, you need funds, you need a lot of other requirements to develop new tourism areas. We focused on policies. And a couple of things that we were able to achieve last year with a small group of people from the hotel sector, from the hospitality sector, from tours, travels, all of this, we put together a working group and we did a couple of things. One of the things that we are really happy and proud of is the ease of doing businesses. So till last year, we had 70 application forms, 70 licenses, and 15 NOCs that you had to acquire to set up a restaurant or hotel in Maharashtra. And of course, most of them were so ridiculous. One was a rolling shutter license. I mean, to roll down a shutter, you needed a license. You needed a license for a neon signboard and a non-neon signboard. So obviously we got done away with all of these things. And from about 70 application forms, we've got it down to 8 application forms. From 70 licenses, we've got it down to 10 licenses. And from about 15 NOCs of different departments, we've got it down to 9 self-certifications. I think that has largely given us a boost. Even today, if you go through my mailbox, you'll find a lot of hotels wanting to, inquire that, how do we come to Maharashtra? And of course, I guide them to the tourism department, but they're like, we've heard about the ease of doing businesses and can we really focus on that? So that is what we're really happy with. We've got a lot of good hotel chains writing to us, wanting to set up their hotels in Maharashtra, resorts in Maharashtra. So that was one of the biggest things that we've been able to achieve. Along with that, we've brought in the agri-tourism policy for farm stays. That has been very, very successful. In each district, we've got at least 15 to 20 new farm stays coming up, be it from strawberries to mangoes to cashew nut farms. All of these areas really are seeing, an upsurge in terms of growth. Then we've got the beach shack policy that's coming. We're waiting for our final CRZ clearances, which of course is my department only, but it's pending with the center now. So we're looking at the CZMP plan 2019 to be approved very soon. And that will be going by the end of this year. We've also brought in a policy for caravan tourism. I think that is something we're really excited about. So a lot of lands would be open for caravans. We've looked at ecotourism. We're not just focusing on Tadoba, which is of course now the capital of the tiger in our country, but we're also looking at other lesser known wildlife safaris within our state, which is something like a flamingo sanctuary, an elephant sanctuary, a tiger corridor, a migratory bird sanctuary, and we have people moving out here. So these are some of the things that we're really focusing on. And, we're looking at a couple of sectors that we've now divided our tourism bit in. We've got the heritage tourism sector, we've got spiritual tourism, we've got ecotourism, we've got the beach tourism, coastal tourism. So these are some of the things really that would be our focus areas from now on. I think that will help us build tourism in our state.
Fantastic, because I think a lot of us have gone out, around us, in Maharashtra, one is not wanting to go abroad and not travel far. So I think that has really brought us close to discovering what is around us. And I'm sure, when you develop some of these, it will be great. On that note, again, when I was in college, for example, which is many decades ago, but we used to go climb forts in the Sahyadris, go to even the sea forts and so on, and a lot of lovely monuments that we have in Maharashtra itself. What has happened in the past few years with the population, etc., is the amount of plastic and waste that has come about, and that continues to sort of disturb these beautiful monuments, the beautiful natural heritage that we have as well. I know that in some of the parts like Taroba, etc., that has been taken care of. But are you doing anything specific, considering your interest in environment and tourism both, to really tackle this huge issue of plastic? And I know there are a lot of solutions out there to recycle, to collect, and so on, but somehow this doesn't seem to be effective. Really, something drastic needs to be done. What are your thoughts on that?
No, if you remember, there's a ban on single-use disposable plastic that we've implemented since 2018. Of course, during the time of pandemic, the monitoring went a little lower. But yes, overall, in terms of our, if you look at our spiritual places, if you look at our places of heritage, if you look at our places of trekking, like you said, and even if you travel by the roadside on both sides of the highways, as the human race, we've been extremely irresponsible and literally thrown things out of a window, not realizing that it's someday going to come back to us. Be it our pollution of rivers, lakes, tourism places, our beaches, our forts, our monuments, our temples. I think we have been largely irresponsible. Now, what we are moving towards is, we've launched a campaign called Maji Vasundhara. And to start off with, like I said, we are looking at our government itself inward, and we've started this competition on Gandhi Jayanti. It'll conclude on the 5th of June, World Environment Day. And we're looking at reducing our own carbon footprint. So a travel audit of your own self and the colleagues, energy audit of your workplace and the places you go to, water audit, tree audit, and the things we can really do for the environment. So we've seen in this competition largely where you have collectors writing to us about an urban forest somewhere, a cleanup drive somewhere, a river cleanup somewhere, a fort cleanup somewhere. So these are some of the things that we're focusing on. Some of them have converted the entire office from regular lights to LED lights. Some people are putting rooftop solar panels. Now, the next step is to bring in the corporates, the NGOs, the police, and even a lot of diplomatic missions like of the United States, of UK, of Norway, Sweden. All of them are working closely with us for the environment, of even the Netherlands. So our plan largely is twofold. Yes, one is you have obviously got things like the extended producer's responsibility, the EPR, which is yet to be implemented, that we're going to focus on from this coming month onwards. And we're sitting together with thinking groups to really focus on creating one of the best EPRs around. So that is something we're working on. But the other thing is, if each one of us starts doing something for the environment, a concept like plogging. A lot of people are doing plogging today. They're running on the beach, and instead of trying to do squats or something, they're just picking up the litter while running around. I think that is something that's helping them burn the fat, as well as help us reduce our waste on the planet. I think these are some of the things. So we're going to move around two things. Yes, an involuntary approach through legislation, through things like the EPR, and which is of course what we're focused on. But two, I think, is largely public participation and public awareness. I think these are some of the things, if we can really focus on, we would see a huge change in the next 5 years.
Thanks, Aditya, for a very candid and a very vibrant discussion. Love your youthful and refreshing approach. Resonates so well with our entrepreneurial spirit, and look forward to doing some collaborations with the government, maybe helping with some solutions that you need. I want to just end by firstly acknowledging the role your government has played in managing the pandemic for all of us. I think not only your government policies, but also all the frontline workers have been phenomenal. And I think in spite of the numbers that we've had, I think we've done well as a state. And would really like to acknowledge that. I'm sure there are a lot of questions on the various topics that we've talked about. So I'm going to hand it over to Utkarsh to take on some of them, and maybe put Aditya on the spot just as he did to me. But thank you again. It was a wonderful interaction. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thackeray. That has been a brilliant conversation. And honestly, I think I speak for everyone when I say that it was feeling like we are speaking with an executive at Maharashtra Inc. rather than, than a government official or somebody who's a government post holder, which I think is always a step in the right direction. We need to be able to
very kind of. I love what I'm doing. That's why I can speak.
No, I think that's very apparent. That's shining through. I don't think we got a single canned answer from you, which is fantastic. I think one of the first questions that we'd like to ask you, and there's a question which has come from Sidullah. He's also a member of the IMC Startup Committee. Is what is the role that you feel like organizations like IMC can play in, and support you in some of the things that you want to achieve in the state?
I think largely when we have organizations like the IMC, and especially existing around for such a long time, very, very successfully, having some of the best thought leaders around, some of the best entrepreneurs around, I think a dash of professionalism to or efficiency can be added to our work. And this interactivity, the interaction, I think really helps us take things forward. For example, I'll give you a small example of, again, like when we were sitting for ease of doing business for the hotel sector, and then we've added things in the unified DCR. We're working around for things like easing out the regulations for them in the urban development department. So when we look at just having only the government working in isolation, we think whatever the government has done is probably the best policy in the world, and now it is best to implement it, and it's 100% implementable. But when we start interacting with people from platforms like IMC, I think that is where we also get a hint of what is more practical, what is better than what is already written on paper. It might look great on paper, but how much of it is really practical, possible, and gives a scope for growth later in the future? I think that sounding board as an advice, as a feedback, I think is really important. The other is, of course, sometimes what happens is the government gets so busy within our own sphere of compliances, paperwork, files, things like that. Newer ideas, looking into the future, what is the next 10 years looking like, what is the next innovation, how is this disruption going to assist us, aid us in better serving the people? I think that is where platforms like you could really help us to tell what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And
absolutely, absolutely. I think a feedback loop between government and industry is critical. So that there's course correction before it's too late, and it's an ongoing process rather than something which is always done in retrospect.
Exactly. I mean, like I said, in tourism, we've set up smaller committees for COVID resurgence and all, and we've got people from the sectors helping us. So I think that is crucial.
Great, great. I think a couple of people have asked a question around education. So I'll just frame it in the context. I think one of the challenges that, being operators in the startup ecosystem in India that we hear a lot about is the fact that there's a dearth of supply of, quality engineers and quality, the output from our colleges is not as high. And it is not in terms of quality as much as it is in terms of quantity. So what are some of the policy initiatives? Again, this is not your department per se, but what are some of the policy initiatives that can impact that positively?
Largely because I've taken over environment tourism, people think that is the only passion area, but education is of course a very, very big sector for me. And when I look at one of the former prime ministers of UK, Mr. Tony Blair, when he was asked in his campaign trail in 1997 of if he was elected as prime minister, what would his top three priorities be? He said it'll be education, number 2 education, and number 3 education. I think that is the amount of importance we should be giving to education, because through education, all the things that we spoke today as problems and solutions and possible solutions can be achieved. We're creating an entire new generation through education. And I'll give you a small hint of what we've done at the BMC, because for the last 10 years I was focusing into the BMC's education sector before we got into government. And I'll just give you a hint of what we've done then, what are the things to come in the state government now. In terms of the Mumbai municipal schools, we run about 1100 and something schools, and in about 8 languages. So we have English, semi-English, Hindi, Marathi, Urdu, Telugu, Tamil, Kannada. And we thought one of the biggest interventions into this was to be technology, because like we are having a Zoom today, and so many people are viewing this conference and can ask questions. We should have taken this across the country as an education sector as well. So what we did in 2011, 2012 is got satellite technology, VSAT, which relays movies into our theaters. We've got the same technology really, relaying classes into our schools. So in 2013, we had Mr. Aaditya Thackeray and Mr. Amitabh Bachchan launching this technology, where we had 90 schools on a pilot basis being connected virtually through the VSAT technology without buffer back then. And we had classes running on that in 4 languages. Today, we've got almost 550 odd classrooms connected through VSAT technology. Every Saturday, you have one teacher or one person from a non-conventional profession going to a studio and connecting and interacting with so many classrooms at one time. Now, you also have classes, for example, in one of the schools I was inaugurating in Vadala, I entered a classroom by mistake, and they were teaching algebra on screen to a class of 50 students. And you had a teacher in class, so not that you're losing out on jobs, because the teacher obviously is monitoring the class, she's checking on the notes and all that, but you have one specialist coming and making life simpler for so many people through technology. So I think that is one of the things that we've achieved in the municipal schools. Like you said, there is right to education in our country, but we don't have right to quality education. By digitization, by creating a standard platform, and that's what I've been pushing for in higher and technical education as well. One student learning in a college of Mumbai should be able to have the same quality and type of education learning in a college in Latur, in Nandurbar, in Sindhudurg, everywhere. I think that is what we should be able to achieve through digitization. Two, more than 44,000 kids today of 8th, 9th, 10th standard are actually learning on tablets. Now, when we look at governments giving tablets around the country, we normally have empty tablets with a wallpaper or empty laptops given to students, and they have Wi-Fi connections, they have cameras. What we did 5 years ago is we got rid of the cameras, we got rid of the Wi-Fi connections, but we put in the entire syllabus again in 3 or 4 languages with audio visual. So you have the entire syllabus in the format of a cartoon series. Sorry. You also have dictionaries, you have notes, and you have the thesaurus on that. So students don't get caught up in terms of what is this word? Do I have to refer back to a dictionary? Your thesaurus, a dictionary, your entire textbook is on your tab. You can keep your textbooks at home or in school, not carry the load on your back. You just have to carry a small tab to school and get it back. And we also give solar charges along with that. So just in case you have a rundown of electricity, you have a backup for that. 3, we looked at the curriculums. We're looking at the infrastructure. So more than 90 schools now have been upgraded. We're calling them the Mumbai Public Schools, common branding. You can have your local names, but Mumbai Public Schools will be found across the city. We're bringing in 24 CBSE schools. We already have 1 CBSE and 1 ICSE school for Mumbai Municipal Corporation, and that is all free of cost. We give 29 items free of cost, right from pencils to school shoes, to socks, to uniforms, to raincoats, to almost everything free of cost, to incentivize education so that boys and girls don't drop out in the middle of school for the lack of your fees. Further on, for girls after 8th standard, we started off with vitamin tablets, calcium, iron tablets, sanitary pads in schools itself, sanitary pad incinerations in schools, so that girls and boys again don't feel the need to drop out in the secondary high school. That is very important. And then we look at extracurriculars. So of course, in terms of extracurriculars in the last 3 or 4 years, we've started off with a couple of things. One is with FIFA and the UEFA Foundation, we've launched a thing called Just Play. In 34 sessions of playing football, we're teaching girls and boys gender equality, hygiene, and sanitation. Why is it important to wash your hands before you eat? Why is it important to gargle after you've eaten? Why is it important to respect girls as much as boys? What is right touch? What is wrong touch? I think this is what we're going forward with in our municipal schools. With the Marylebone Cricket Club, which is the Lords, and with the Royal Dance Academy and the British Council, we signed up an MOU 2 years ago. It's running now. The girls are learning cricket and the boys are learning ballet. I think we're trying to get a gender balance in our schools. We started off with this one campaign where we started looking at girls and boys again in the 8th, 9th, 10th standard in our municipal schools. You go to them and they will look like they're in the 4th standard, and that is because of a stunted growth. Now that can be that can be the source of malnutrition or coming from malnutrition, because either you eat less or this is because you've eaten less and not the right kind of food. When we looked at why, we also realized that sometimes most of these kids have dental decay. So we started off with Dr. Sandesh Maikar's clinic and tied up with Colgate. From standard 1 to standard 4, first decade, no decay. So we said that the first 10 years of a child, if he has strong teeth, healthy teeth, his eating habits would be right, her timings of eating would be right, and you wouldn't be eating ice creams or soft drinks because you have dental decay. So we did free checkups of all these kids, and now they have healthier teeth. We looked at what they're eating. Some of them were trying to eat gutka, some of them were on absolute unhealthy food. So that is what came in. And now we're moving towards mental counseling and career counseling. I think we need to draw parallels between curricular, infrastructure, and extracurriculars. Again, in this, we're empowering our teachers in terms of how we are teaching, our teaching methods, what is the output, because very often in government schools and municipal schools, you realize that even in the 8th standard, a child can't read or write. So we brought in the Quality Council of India, NABET, to actually audit ourselves, audit our schools, our teachers, and help us where interventions are needed. And today we have people like Ms. Indu Shani, Dr. DPN Prasad, you have Radha Goenka, you've got the RPG Foundation, you've got Teach for India, you've got Pratham, Akanksha, Pehle Akshar, all of that helping us. And this, if we can really spread across the state and the country, where we have focus on curricular, extracurricular, and infrastructure, we can have a lot more kids coming up and learning the right way. And again, one of the things that we need to really push on is incentivize and allow the kids to ask questions. Today we are into rote learning, and that is why we don't have research or development or the spirit of inquiry in our schools. I think if we can let them ask questions, I think that will be a better way forward.
No, absolutely. And I think these are all initiatives which are not headline grabbing initiatives, but these are the ones which, kind of.
And then they never get headlines because they're not masala headlines. So
yeah. So I think, Colgate in the school to make sure that kids' teeth don't decay does not make it to the front page, but it's the kind of stuff that has a lasting impact. And especially the work that you spoke about around gender sensitization and gender inclusion. I think that's critical to create quality human beings that are coming out of India in the long term. I think we are almost out of time, but I don't want to let you go without asking you one lighthearted question, which is if and again going back to how this has been feeling like an interaction with somebody who's from Maharashtra. If there was one company in the world globally that you would want to work at, if you're just graduating from college and government was not your path, which would that company be? What kind of industry would you want to be in?
That is very, very tough, because I think, I would only think of that if I wasn't really happy with the job I am in currently today, but I love my job. Yeah, but there are 2-3 companies which I really think have been path-breaking for all of us around the world. I mean, one is definitely Apple, because, after 2007, the world has changed. After Apple came in, you had a lot more smartphones coming in, then you have whole new social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and whatever more, and you have got influencers, and the amount of job possibilities it has created. I think that is tremendous, right from food deliveries to almost anything. So I think definitely Apple changed the world in terms of even audio engineering, in terms of filmmaking, everything. So that is one of the platforms. And today, if you see, I think SpaceX is changing the world. It's just phenomenal to see what they're doing with the whole space program, launching and even coming back, and the way it comes back.
We saw the SN10 launch and
it is mind blowing. I've seen that landing bit back on the planet.
Yeah.
Must be at least 100 times, just slow motion and reverse 10 seconds. It's phenomenal. So I think these are some of the things, and I don't think I'm capable enough or great enough to be working in those companies, but yeah, it is just mind boggling to see what the human mind can really achieve and the human intent can really achieve.
Wonderful. So this is fantastic. I'll hand it over to Selvi, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear all. I know it is too good a discussion to stop with such a dynamic and great speaker, and I think all of us have really enjoyed it. But we regret, because time is ticking, and we cannot take any further questions. So as we come to the end of this interesting and knowledgeable session, may I request Mr. Juzo Khorakiwala, Vice President, IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to present the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Selvi, and good afternoon to all of you. Aditya ji, I do have a prepared vote of thanks, but I'm not going to use it. After hearing you with so much of eloquence, so much of clarity of thought, so much of knowledge that you have in such a short time, it's amazing. I think all of us at IMC, all those who are part of this show this morning, I'm sure are truly impressed by your depth and breadth of knowledge that you have so quickly acquired. You have covered areas like ease of doing business, and the most important thing I must say, Aditya ji, is post-startup, post-getting into business. Those of us who are in business, we know exactly where the pain points are when we interact with the government or with many other authorities. And you have touched upon a very, very important area of ease of doing business, post getting into business. If that area is tackled in your tenure, I'm sure Maharashtra will be a talked about state in this country, not only in this country, but beyond. That much I can assure you, being part of a business family for so many years. You have covered areas like tourism, environment, energy transition so beautifully that I must tell you that you are no more a startup. And we wish that we have many, many Aaditya Thackeray's all over the country in our political system, so that India can be completely transformed by your eloquence and by your clarity of thought and your commitment to what you have just told us. Thank you very much, Aaditya ji, for being with IMC, and IMC will really, really engage with Maharashtra in the years to come, and will be an enabler for you to transform Maharashtra into a leading state in the country. Thank you very much for being with us. I must also thank Mrs. Mariwala and the entire team of the startup doing business for getting this whole thing organized and getting such a stalwart, a young stalwart amidst us to, really refreshing presentation this morning. Thank you, everybody, for being with us, all the participants, and have a good day and a very good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya Bhai.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We'd just like to add a note of thanks to Pearl for organizing this. Thank you, Pearl.
Thank you, Aditya. Thanks for this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all participants to making this happen. Thank you.
Thanks.
And special thanks to Pearl and Paula and Utkarsh. Thank you.